So you mentioned some of the old funding rules.
Yeah.
Doing your market research and, before you invest anything, just knowing the terrain, all that.
Yes.
And how things have changed, in your words, beyond all recognition. But to what degree do you think it's still useful to use some of those? It might not be as viable to approach things in that way, but do you think some of those old approaches are still relevant, even in this digital media age?
Yeah, I think even in this age, it's actually really important to think of the process as a business, because there are a lot of film schools out there that are actually producing filmmakers, and I've been involved in that side of it. And people want to go and they want to make their films. They want to have their voice. They've got an idea about a film they want to make. But when I was teaching this, what I found was people actually also wanted to know about whether they could make a living out of it. And that's really what I wanted to present, is the idea that this can pay the bills. It can be a profession, as it was when I kind of started out in the industry. It was kind of closed. You had to be an ACTT member. You couldn't make a film of your own. You certainly couldn't pick up a camera and go and shoot something. But maybe there's a bit of a balance that needs to be sort of struck, which is that if you've got an idea for a film, think about whether it's got a market, think about whether you can sell it, and think about how you're going to sell it. Quite apart from actually trying to raise the production funding, I think it's a really good idea to think about where ultimately you're going to get that money back, either the investor's money, or in the case of me, quite often I've actually invested in the production myself. And it may be a long time before you get that money back.
But it's nice when you do.
Yeah, I'm still getting checks. It's great.
Are you?
Yeah. 10 quid last week.
Yeah, I get that sometimes.
So it goes down. That's after 10 years, you know what I mean? But I mean, that's the point. It goes on. It's the gift that keeps on giving if you hit the right formula.
And when you're pitching in that way, do you have to do like a business plan or something so that you can convince people of how it would be successful, or what time of day it needs to be shown, or is that kind of up to the investor? Yeah, like how you see the program making money, how it would pan out, the time frames. Do you have to think about all of those things as the creator of the film subject?
If you want to get anything like a pre-sale, you'd have to say this is where it's actually going to be exhibited. Or in the case of some of those earlier programs I was making, I could say, for example, I did this very large pre-sale with W.H. Smith in the days when he used to sell content on DVD and VHS. I had to get a pre-sale for that. Then I could go to the bank and say, this company wants to buy that content. They bought this many units. And so I could prove that effectively it was worth them putting some money in. So it became a token which would enable me to raise the funding for that production. So that was effectively the business plan, effectively. I showed that it had a market. I showed that it could be taken out into the marketplace and that it would ultimately sell, and that it wasn't just a vanity project. So that was the key thing, having, the knowledge that it's actually going to go out there and sell.
And now, I guess that principle still applies. You've got to be able to prove you can sell it, but how does the approach differ then now, would you say?
Well, this is the interesting area, is this crossover and the convergence that's taken place, and you suddenly realise that the whole thing has opened up.
Do you think it is a convergence still? Or do you think that old way is just dead?
Well, this is the question I'm interested in, is whether television actually still has a life, or whether advertising in its sense also has a life too, or whether the whole thing is actually going to evolve. I personally believe that there's going to be a long-term market for traditional terrestrial and satellite television outside of the internet domain, because we've got a demand for very high-quality content that still exists. The converging process is still taking place. All that's happening is that it's opening up and becoming, it feels, more of a level playing field that gives access to more and more people to engage with this, and that's what makes it quite exciting. But at the end of the day, it feels as though it's going to be content that still carries it. It's the quality of the content, not just the fact you've got a great camera and the ability to sound record, some great kit and put the graphics on. Ultimately, it seems to involve script writing something that's actually going to sell, a concept that's going to sell and is going to attract your audience. That's still the case with going to broadcasters today and trying to get something commissioned, even trying to get a pre-sale. You've got to make it hit some of their markers, otherwise
and you have
they're not
to
going
bear
to
that in mind when you're writing it then, do you think?
When you're writing the pitch for the broadcasters, you certainly got to do it. It's almost like sort of hitting the template of what it is they're looking for. So often I've been asked by broadcasters like Discovery Channel or Sky, have you seen our content? Do you know what it is we want? how does it fit into our schedule? And if you can't prove that, they're just going to stop the conversation very quickly.
So someone who's really keen to release their work in this kind of way, they would do very well to be consistently researching these channels then, watching them, knowing the content inside out, and then finding a way that their own voice and work can actually fit into these platforms.
Fit in within that established template to a degree.
Yeah.
That seems to be the truth still with terrestrial and traditional satellite broadcasting.
At the same time, though, with this new era, the creative is empowered to be a bit more fearless, to dare to be a pioneer, a trailblazer, and so there's a degree to which you don't want to necessarily emulate what's been done before. But so what's the balance there? You want to be informed by what's worked in the past, but if you want to actually carve a new lane and tell a new story, how do you pull that off?
Yeah, well, because they also need, as well as fitting in with the channel's tick boxes that you've talked about, they also need to be a niche, right?
Yeah.
And you've got to find your niche as a creator.
I think an answer will lie perhaps in the sense of, doing market research will work in both cases. So it'll work if you do want to emulate what's been done before, but it's also worth doing if you absolutely don't, because then you have to know where there's a gap in the market, what audiences haven't been represented yet.
Just in response to that, I think we're talking about how you need to do your research, you need to know your channels, you need to know these tick boxes, would you say, of things that they might be looking for, but you also need to balance that with your own niche, your own truth, your own voice, and it's a consistent balancing act between the marketplace, the business, the brand, living off this job, and creating truthful, authentic stories, because in the end, those things are the ones that are going to triumph, right? Things that are truthful. We look at our zeitgeists, we look at things like Fleabag, Game of Thrones, things that touch on a nerve for audiences and become super shows that just the beat ratings in such a big way. So, I suppose what the impossible question, what's the secret? But how would you guys both expand on that?
But whether you should actually what decision you need to make if you're trying to turn this into a business and you want to run with it as a profession, can you continue to make those kind of decisions? I think there are hundreds of ways of approaching this. And we're going to be talking to, another documentary filmmaker, a mainstream UK documentary filmmaker, multi-BAFTA winner. Really interesting to see that she's approaching her documentary filmmaking purely from the perspective of this is the kind of content I want to make, and this is the story I want to tell, and she's finding that there is a story out there, so it's very much what you're saying. She's being totally authentic to what she wants to do, and it's carried her through for the last 25, 30 years. I suppose there are different ways of going about this. I've always tried to, because I've come from the film promotion sector, I'm always trying to think of how we can create commercial content that can get out there and continue to earn money in a way. So it's a very kind of different approach. I think there's room for both approaches, but it is a different one. But
I think one of the key things that differs now from the old school way is there is less of a need for permission. You don't need anyone above you to grant you permission to create something. Removing that,
it creates the opportunity. That's the thing.
And so the market research, it's almost done for a different reason. Not to demonstrate to someone else, listen, no, it would work, look. It's to actually inform the content for yourself and then go ahead and do it. And I think we're talking about authenticity. It seems to be the case that the projects that have really taken off on a digital platform, the content creators themselves have had such a conviction that they've gone forward, despite whatever reasons there might be to doubt. They've just gone forward, and there's something in that. There's a virtue in that will reward you in this digital age, I think.
I think that's true. It's actually finding that unique voice in each case